Welcome back to the Word for the Valley podcast, where we've come as far as chapter 20. Now, after the rich young ruler walked away, Peter said, "See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have?" And while Jesus does answer that question, he also begins to address something deeper underneath it. Because beneath Peter's question is possibly another question, one that he may not have said out loud, but something to the effect of, "Doesn't our sacrifice make us greater than him?" Well, in this episode, Pastor Mike begins walking us through Matthew 20, where Jesus tells a parable that confronts our assumptions about reward, fairness, comparison, and the grace of God's kingdom. Let's keep going with Pastor Mike as we pick back up at Matthew 20.
For those of you who care, you know that this is the week of the NFL draft. Many of you probably don't care, and that's fine as well. But this is the week of the NFL draft. Some young men's dreams are being met. I always love the scene, especially on kind of day one, round one. Those guys get called and they are hugging everybody in sight. Grandma, mom, dad, brother, sister, people they don't even like are getting hugs, kind of thing. They are so excited about the potential, about the new job, about playing in the NFL, about the new contract. If you sign a day one contract, it's a nice contract. Everything there that goes into it is remarkable. And so as I come to this, I can't help but viewing this in some ways as a draft. But here, obviously, God drafting us into his kingdom, to be a part of his team, to do his work. And we see kind of this here as the landowner goes out to call laborers, kind of viewing it from that vantage point. Now the context is this. In the story last week where Jesus dealt with the rich young ruler, telling him that he was going to have to sell everything to be able to follow Jesus, and then him walking away not having done it, Peter's response to that scene in verse 27 of chapter 19 was, "See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have?" Well, Jesus immediately answers that question by telling Peter and the disciples, well, this is what you will get, right? You're going to get 12 thrones in my kingdom. You're going to have a special, place of responsibility and all. There is something coming for you. He answers that question directly in verse 28. But he sums it up at verse 30 with the words, "But many are first, or who are first will be last, and the last first." And we'll notice in chapter 20, verse 16, that he bookends this parable with the same words. So what he's doing here is, it's interesting, he answers Peter's question up front at first. But what he's going to do now in the next parable is he's answering the question that Peter's not asking out loud. Because there's an implied notion in Peter's question. What are we left everything. We did this, right? In contrast to the rich young ruler. What are we going to get as a reward? The implied question is, doesn't that make us better than him? That's the underlying question that Jesus is going to deal with here in chapter 20. Doesn't that make us, but we did this. He didn't do it, obviously, right? We're going to get a reward, and that makes us better than him. Doesn't that seem to imply this? And Jesus is going to answer that. Now, here's the remarkable thing about the way the Lord works in our lives. And he's just done this to me this week, right? I have running questions that I'm asking God. There's certain things that I'm kind of seeking him on, almost on a daily basis. How can I do this better? How can I learn this more? How can I put this into play? These kinds of things that I'm asking him on a regular basis. He is gracious to answer those questions. He is also indescribably wise to not just answer the questions that I ask out loud, but answer the questions that I mean that I don't even know how to ask yet. And he will speak well ahead of into our lives if we pay attention and allow him to do this. One of the hindrances, something that I've been talking with our elders and in particular Jordan about recently is in discipleship, one of the rules of thumb is if it's not a transgression that has to be corrected, I kind of wait until somebody asks the question. I've learned years and years ago that if I overshare what I see in somebody else's life before they're willing to receive it, it is pearls before swine, and it makes the matter much worse than if I just kept my mouth shut and watched and waited. And so I have learned to wait for people to ask And when they ask the question, then I'm willing to share. And sometimes that's 3, 4, 10 years down the road of things of like, I've been watching this in this person's life. I would have loved to be able to address it, but I know that they're not able to hear it. And so I will withhold it and keep it until they finally ask the question. The remarkable thing that the Lord takes in all of our lives, kind of the freedom that he takes that nobody else can take, is that he will answer the questions that we haven't asked yet. And we don't have a choice as to whether or not we are going to listen to those things. In some ways, those actually become the real things. Because now God is addressing this. He is talking about it. We want the details on our reward, right? And Jesus is saying, listen, make sure you're the right kind of servant. Oh, I want to focus all over on this. And he's like, that's fine. That'll happen, right? Blah, blah, blah. I give you the answers. That's fine. But this is really where my heart is. And he shifts our focus and he shifts our attention to the righter things, to the better things, to the things that are more important to him. And this is what he's doing here. And it's very important, and I find it very helpful. Now, verse 1 of chapter 20, this parable. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. The main character in this parable is clearly the landowner. It is his vineyard, which is the world, the kingdom of God in the world. It is his vineyard. It is his mercy. It is his agreement, his covenant, his contract. It's his agreement. It's his money that he's paying to the workers, the laborers. And they are his hired men. When they agree to the contract, they are his. He can tell them what to do and basically how to do it for the day. He's the main character in the parable. It can be easy to look at this parable and very much view it from the vantage point of the laborers. If you only see this parable from the vantage point of the laborers, you are seeing it on far too low a level. We want to learn to see this from the vantage point of the landowner, this parable. But first and foremost now the laborers. It says in verse 2 that when it says he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Okay, so a landowner has a vineyard. He goes out early in the morning, verse 1 tells us, that's about 6 a.m. We're going to find the workday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, he goes out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. The first guys that are there, ready to take on a day's work, right? He calls them to himself and he agrees with them. He basically sets up the term for the day, right? Will you work for me? I'll work for you. What do I get paid? Well, this is what you're going to get paid. You're going to get paid a denarius today, which was the common wage for a day's labor. This is what a normal working man would make in one day for working one day's labor. So the agreement is above board. It's accurate. It's appropriate. Everything here is kind of by the book in regards to how this would work for a day laborer. Okay, you work for me one day. At the end of the day, I'll pay you your wages. Tomorrow we may be back in the marketplace, and maybe I'll hire you again tomorrow if this whole thing goes well. If not, somebody else can have you, kind of thing, and just move along, kind of like that. One day's work for one day's wage, and he sent them into his vineyard. Now, let me make this point. Okay, please do not misunderstand me here. Right? You need to understand this from the right vantage point. But in regards to God's kingdom, in this parable, he's looking for workers. He is looking for laborers. People who will expend themselves to the point of exhaustion for the purpose of the landowner. Now, we know within the body of Christ, right, we abide in the vine to bear good fruit, right? All of our work, everything we do in our service of the Lord, in our lives as Christians, everything we do grows out of who we are. Okay? What I do grows out of who I am, and primarily who I am with God through Jesus Christ. Right? Everything in God's kingdom grows out of who we are. But never make the mistake in thinking that the only thing that God is concerned about is who you are. Because if who you are doesn't do anything, then who you are isn't good enough to be who you are. Does that make any sense? Because when who you are lives itself out in practical experience, that's when who you are is functioning the way that it ought to be, to the highest degree possible. Okay? So the idea of, I'm just going to sit around, just kind of own my navel. What's a navel? Navel. I'm just going to kind of meditate. I'm going to go to the mountains of Tibet. I'm just going to kind of separate away from the world, and I'm just going to seek God and really kind of focus kind of on the inner man and just kind of do this. And, there are seasons for that. There are times for that. That's all very much important. But one of the things you'll find in the discipleship of a true Christian, and you can see it in the Gospels and you can see it in the book of Acts, is that kind of their call from God always led them to do something. There are a lot of people that live their Christian experience in their heads. And that is not the truest form of the Christian experience. The Christian experience is lived in community, it's lived in contact, it's lived through labor that grows out of relationship. Don't mistake that. Now, also, don't be so Pennsylvania Dutch that you jump to the other extreme, where that it's all labor and it's not relationship. It's not an either or, one or the other. It's both of them. It's labor that grows out of relationship and that deepens them. Labor grows out of relationship and it deepens relationship. Okay? We always joke around here with the guys. If a women want to do an event, they can do a tea. We've done women's teas before. We've done other kinds of events, and the ladies can get along just fine, kind of looking at each other and talking, and you get somebody to start a question and everybody kind of jabbers away and kind of, that's what I assume anyway. I haven't attended any of those things, but you do that to a group of guys, they will shrivel up and die like raisins right on their seats. They're like, hey, well, let's go have tea and talk to one another. One of the best ways to actually get a guy talking is you put a hammer in his hand, or you put a football in his hand, or a baseball in his hand, or something like that, and you go out and you do something, and before long, he's talking, he doesn't even know he's talking. I've had probably the best and deepest relationships with guys, kind of fellowship conversations on roofs, like nailing shingles and stuff, and before long, they're just kind of talking about stuff, and you're like, I should record this because you will be embarrassed that you have told me later, because I want to bring it back up later because it's really good, kind of stuff. But they'll just open up in a remarkable kind of way. Again, a relationship is not just all relationship, right? In my relationship with Julie, it's not, I don't want to just sit there and look at each other, right? Sometimes you just need to go for a good walk, right? Nonetheless, you understand. These are laborers here. For a denarius a day, and he sent them into his vineyard. Now, in verse 3, he went out about the 3rd hour. 3 hours later, this is 9 a.m., and saw others standing, and this is a key word in this parable, others standing idle in the marketplace. Idle means they have not yet engaged in a work. They're waiting. They're watching. They're not making progress. They're not engaging in anything productive. So he saw here others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them now, in verse 4, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, I will give you. So they went. Now we're going to find the landowner does this a couple times in this parable. He does it 3rd hour, he does it at the 6th hour, he does it at the 9th hour, and he does it at the 11th hour. For these individuals who are hired later in the day, who will actually be working less than the full day, they would expect to be getting paid less than the full day's wage. That's what they would be expecting. So when the landowner says to them, we will give you whatever is right to give you, they agree, expecting that it will be the denarius minus, say, 3 hours worth of work, whatever the valuation of that would be to the landowner. That would be what they would be expecting. But it's remarkable here, he doesn't clearly articulate the value when he brings them into his field. Because there is another intended purpose amongst the landowner that will be revealed at the end, kind of an additional grace. And so he's not going to break his word. He's not going to make a contract and say, well, this is what it's going to be. He leaves it open enough that he gives himself space to bless them more than what the contract would rightfully deserve at this point in time. So he doesn't spell it out specifically. He just says, whatever is right, and that's another key word in this parable, whatever is right, I will give you. And so they went. Now again, he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did likewise. So he went out again at 12 noon, then he went out again at 3 p.m. and did likewise. Now 3 p.m., they only have to work till 6 p.m. They're only going to get a 3-hour, day's work here. But they're still there, they're waiting, and he seeks them and he hires them to come into his vineyard. Now, one of the things that this speaks out kind of in the parable is that there is some degree of urgency in regards to God getting his work done. We know that God's not in a hurry, but he oftentimes doesn't move as slowly as we do. If we drag our feet, if we avoid things, well, it'll happen when it happens, que sera. Or people say this all the time, right? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Well, sure, it's meant to be, but it just might have to be meant to be through somebody else, because your meant to be is waiting for it to fall out of the sky, right? You think a hamburger is just going to flop right out of the sky and fall onto your table kind of thing, like already pre-butchered and cooked and stuff, like you're just whatever kind of thing, and you don't have to actually do anything for it and not realize that there is a step here to take to re-engage in what God is calling us to. Here for these laborers here, there is a desire for them to get to the work, because as the day progresses, it seems apparent that there's an urgency of getting the harvest and getting the job done. That's significant to the Lord. Okay? Again, God is not primarily concerned about the work. But the work in his kingdom does influence and impact other people's lives. And you can go too fast in your service of the Lord. But I'm convinced, at least one of the struggles coming out of 2020 for me, going too slow. Not being on time, not being kind of ready to take the next things when the next things were needed to be taken, and to be too slow. And so there's a danger on both sides here. But God is persistent in hiring workers because, right, what he had said to back at the woman of the well, and he told the disciples, right, the harvest is plentiful. We need more laborers. Pray that there be more laborers for this whitened harvest field. And he calls more in. Now, verse 6, about the 11th hour, this is 5 p.m. now. The 11th hour, you've ever heard that phrase, the 11th hour? So it means there's only one more hour to go. About the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle again, and said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? Now, one of the remarkable things here about these laborers is that they don't give up the hope of getting a job, right? They waited 11 twelfths of the day, 11 hours out of the 12. They have waited to get picked up, to get hired, to get a job. They didn't go home at 3 in the afternoon. Well, it's kind of the last call kind of thing. There's, if I get a job now, it's only going to be 3 hours worth of, money and these kinds of things. Like might as well just go home and watch TV. Might as well just go home and eat something or something. Might as well just go home if that's all it is. They stay out at the marketplace in an effort to be hired. This is the benefit of these workers, that they don't give up on being selected, on being drafted. And well, here he says, why you've been standing here idle all day? Now here's the sad part of it in verse 7. They said to him, because no one hired us. Because no one hired us. Translate that, right? No one wanted us. Nobody else wanted us. We wanted to be wanted. We stepped on the playground because we really wanted to play kickball. Either that or our teacher told we had to, kind of thing, right? Maybe we didn't actually want to. They just told us we had to. They lined us up. They told the kids to choose sides. How cruel, right? And of course the great athletes get picked first. Friends get picked second. And here I am, me and something there that looks mostly human. Another poor soul, that's there kind of on the line, waited to be picked, right? we're going to play kickball, and they literally don't have the faculties to actually play kickball. And they get chosen. And now here we are. The last one left. How do you feel? Feel needed. Feel wanted. Right? Cruelly enough, sometimes in that kind of kickball situation, the two captains look at each other and said, please, you take him. You know, like, he will actually hurt our team more if he's on our team. He will be a benefit to us if he's on your team. Would you please have him? Would you take him? Well, that kid obviously walks away feeling unwanted. Probably feeling very bad at kickball, which is not the end of the life, okay? It's okay. Yeah. A lot of really smart people have been really bad at kickball, okay? These are the ones that the Lord waits for. And he goes to them and he selects them because no one else hired us. Basically, then it's almost like, well, then whoever's left, come on with me. And here's the beauty of God's selection. You may feel like you're being drafted, right? And in some ways we are. We're called to this, right? But the beauty of God's calling is that he calls everyone. Everyone who is willing to be called will get called. Everyone who is willing to labor in his vineyard will have an opportunity to labor in his vineyard. Nobody will be cast out who is willing to work there. Nobody will be excluded on the basis of merit or on the basis of whatever. Nobody will be excluded there. Everybody who hangs out and waits on the Lord, even to the 11th hour, will get hired. It's okay. This is God's design. So, no one here hired us. Well, he said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you will receive. It's just thinking about this in light of the NFL draft. The very last guy drafted in every single draft, it was the 49ers this year, picked up a quarterback from Iowa State. I've been trying to beat my brain the whole worship time to figure out remember what his name was. I literally can't remember his name. What do they call the last guy drafted in the NFL draft? Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant. That's why I can't remember his name. Because he's irrelevant. Every year there's a guy who's known in the NFL draft as the irrelevant one, as Mr. Irrelevant, right? That's who gets selected here. Mr. and Mrs. Irrelevant. No one hired us. No one wanted us. Didn't think we would be a benefit to them. No one hired us. So he said to them, all right, you also go into the vineyard. And again, same thing they had said to those hired at the 3rd and the 6th and the 9th hours. Whatever is right, you will receive. So they would be expecting here 1/12 of a day's wage, which isn't a lot, but it's more than nothing. Whatever is right, you will receive. Now, verse 8. So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. Now, again, in this society, this is how this worked. You worked the day and then you lined up. The boss's station or wherever kind of that was posted, right? The cubicle on wheels, you know, they would have at a job site, these kinds of things. You lined up there and then they would actually pay your day's wage as you would leave. Here, they line up those who got hired last to be paid first. Working in reverse order, sending out those who worked least to get paid first. So when those who had came, who were hired about the 11th hour there in verse 9, that they each received a denarius. So they lined up, paid the last first, and the 11th hour guys, those who were going to get 1/12 of a day's wage, they come to the landowner and they get a full denarius, a full day's wage. No doubt for these irrelevant individuals picked last for kickball that nobody else wanted and probably had given up any hope of having any, dinner this evening because they didn't have any work. Walk away not only with a little meager portion to barely get by, but they are given the full day's wage as if they had worked from 6 a.m. all the way on. They would be celebrating, jumping up and down, looking at one another. What'd you get? What'd you get? I got a denarius. I got a denarius too. Look at that. That's so awesome. And obviously in that, the word begins to spread to all of the other workers as well. Everybody knows that these there that were gotten paid at the 11th hour workers, everybody knows that they got far more than they deserved. Everybody knows it. It's interesting, not everybody celebrates it, especially when it comes to them. It says in verse 10, but when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. So then the 9th hour workers come. They're hoping for a denarius plus. The boss gives them a denarius. Right. It's not bad for 3 hours of work. I was just maybe hoping for a little bit more. Then the 6 hour workers come. Right? Denarius plus a denarius. Not bad for 6 hours worth of work. At the beginning of the day, I would have taken it, right? Now on the backside of it, I was hoping for a little bit more. Maybe I'm a little bit discouraged or disappointed that it wasn't more, but it's okay. Then the 3rd hour workers come. Denarius plus? No, just a denarius. Okay, well, again, at the beginning of the day, they had told me I was going to get a full day's wage. That's fine. I got a full day's wage without working 3 hours. So, more than good, right? And then the final ones come. And they get the denarius and they begin to question the landowner. It says in verse 11, or let's go back to verse 10, when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. Every one of them is getting paid the same. And when they had received it, look, they complained against the landowner. The tension is mounting as the line is progressing through. And the ones here at the end who had agreed to work the day's labor for a day's wage, they are convinced that they now deserve more because everybody else is also getting paid a denarius and they are working far less than those who'd worked the full day. And rather than celebrating with those who are getting paid more than they deserve, they're complaining that they're not getting paid more than those who worked less. And the interesting thing in this is this. They know they can't complain against their other fellow laborers because it's not their fault. It wasn't their field. They didn't do the hiring and they're not doing the paying. Who they end up complaining against ultimately is the landowner, who it was his field, it's his money, it's his payment, and it was his contract that they signed. That they're actually complaining against God. I think one of the things, and the Lord does this to me on a fairly regular basis, is just simply remind me who I'm working for. Who are you working for? Don't like it. It's not working out. You thought it was going to be different. You wanted something different, blah, 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 right? But this is what I called you to. Are you willing to do it, basically? Like, are you willing to do what I asked you to do? Well, yes, but I don't like it in comparison to this, or I would want it to be this, but I'm doing what you asked me to do. I'm trying to walk where you want me to walk and do what you want me to do. I just don't kind of like the details. Yeah, God, you're fine, right? It's just the details I don't like. And the Lord will oftentimes come back to me and say, listen, I put you in those details. This is the body I connected you with. These are the people I called you to serve. So if you're complaining against them, you're complaining against me. Those kids I gave to you, I gave you those kids. Now all of a sudden, at one point you wanted kids. Tried to have kids. You got kids. Now you don't like them. Right? Wish they would grow up faster or go away or be perfect or something, whatever kind of thing. Now, but you don't realize, listen, I gave you those kids. You're complaining against those kids. You're complaining against me. You're complaining against those people. You're complaining against me. Because I put you there. This is not random. This is not whatever, where you get to design your own life, build a life or something, right? Or the books where you get to pick your own ending books, these kinds of, that's not how this works. To join me means that you join me here. And so to surrender to me means that you surrender to me in the context at which I called you to surrender. Again, there are a lot of people, they don't mind surrendering to the Lord as long as it doesn't have a context. As long as there's not really people they have to be committed to. One of the things the Lord is challenging me in my own life is just to measure out what kind of submission I have to the body of Christ. Am I submitted to my own pastor? Am I doing what I need to be doing, right? Because there's a lot of assumptions of submission, I think, in the body of Christ by and large. That's just not genuine submission. Well, I'm submitted to the Lord, but just don't tell me what to do, kind of thing. Don't ever let the pastor tell you anything, kind of thing. But yes, of course I'm submitted. I'm just not sure it works that way. I think that's more words than reality. And here, in this context, to complain against the payment given to the others is to complain against the landowner.
We're reminded that God's calling is marked by grace. And in the parable, no one who was willing to labor in the vineyard was left without opportunity. Whether they were called early in the day or at the 11th hour, the invitation still came. And that reveals something beautiful about the kingdom of God. You see, His call is not limited by human merit, status, timing, or comparison. Everyone who is willing to come is welcome. Everyone who waits on the Lord and responds to His invitation is given a place in His work. And that's the grace of God's design. All right, I hope you can join us next time for part 2 of this episode. This is the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.